My topic, which I chose, is cultural diplomacy throughout the Commonwealth. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to be here today this afternoon. Frankly, I must confess that this afternoon's event is something I've looked forward to with much anticipation. At the outset, allow me to commend the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy under the astute leadership of Executive Director and Founder Maxie Dumfried. Am I correct? Is that? For your impactful work and initiative in the study of cultural diplomacy throughout the Commonwealth. And also allow me to thank you for inviting me to participate in this important and timely international symposium on cultural diplomacy. I'm conscious of the fact that among the experts here this afternoon, I know there are well-rounded academics and practitioners in the field of cultural diplomacy. I personally cannot claim no such expertise, but do believe that by virtue of my position as High Commissioner and as a member of the Commonwealth Board of Governors, I have been fortunate to experience vicariously and otherwise many of the tenets of the intellectual diplomacy at work. In light of what I have just said, I'm also conscious that I will probably bypass what some of you may well consider being the chapter and verse in this area. My approach, and to avoid repetition, will be simply glean over the concept of cultural diplomacy and then squarely focus on what can be seen as the Commonwealth's modus operandi, which epitomizes cultural diplomacy. I start. Cultural diplomacy. A good starting point is to reflect upon what is cultural diplomacy. U.S. Senator Reinhardt once opined as follows: cultural diplomacy is a domain of diplomacy concerned with establishing, developing, and sustaining relations with foreign states by way of culture, art, and education. It is also a proactive process of external projection in which a nation's value system and unique cultural personality are promoted at a bilateral and multilateral level. An even more straightforward interpretation posits that cultural diplomacy is a type of public diplomacy and soft power that includes the exchange of ideas, information, art, and other aspects of culture among nations and their peoples in order to foster mutual understanding. Though it has existed as a practice for centuries, over the past decade, an interesting level of attention has been paid to cultural diplomacy, so much so that today, as you well know, it is a vibrant and innovative academic field of research. Cultural diplomacy is essentially the exhibition of soft power, which well-renowned American political scientist Joseph Nye described as the ability to persuade through culture, values, and ideas, as opposed to hard power, which conquers and coerces through military might. With this paradigm in mind, I will now focus on the nexus of the Commonwealth and cultural diplomacy. Again, as I have noted, the Commonwealth's modus operandi essentially epitomizes cultural diplomacy. As you are aware, the Commonwealth is a voluntary association of 54 independent sovereign states spread over every continent and ocean, sharing ideas and experiences, skills and knowledge, and a common language and heritage. its 2 million people are found in Africa, Asia, the Americas, the Caribbean, Europe, and South Pacific, and account for nearly 30% of the world's population. They are of many religions, races, languages, and cultures. The Commonwealth works to promote peace and international cooperation, democracy and good governance, respect for human rights and rule of law, and the alleviation of poverty through sustainable economic and social development. These core values of the association are expressed in 3 landmark declarations. 1, Declarations of Commonwealth Principles, which was agreed by the heads of government of member countries when they met in Singapore in 1971. Harare Commonwealth Declaration, agreed at the 1991 heads of government meeting in Zimbabwe. And lastly, affirmation of core Commonwealth values, agreed at the 2009 heads of government meeting in Trinidad. The Singapore Declaration 1971. In the Singapore 1991 Declaration of Commonwealth Principles, the heads of government, notably amongst other points, emphasized that Commonwealth of Nations is a voluntary association of independent sovereign states, each responsible for its policy, consulting and cooperating in the common interest of their peoples and in the promotion of international understanding and world peace. Members of the Commonwealth come from territories in the 6 continents and 5 oceans, and include peoples of different races, languages, and religions, and display every stage of economic development, from poor developing nations to wealthy industrialized nations. They encompass a rich variety of cultures, traditions, and institutions. Within the diversity, all members of the Commonwealth hold certain principles in common. It is by pursuing these principles that the Commonwealth can continue to influence international society for the benefit of mankind. Belief that international peace and order are essential to the security and prosperity of mankind. They also believe in the liberty of the individual, in equal rights for all citizens, regardless of race, color, creed, or political belief, and in their inalienable right to participate by means of free and democratic political processes in framing the society in which they live. The Commonwealth believes that it can provide a constructive example of the multinational approach, which is vital to the peace and progress in the modern world. The association is based on consultation, discussion, and operation. The Harare Declaration in 1991, heads of government via the Harare Declaration reaffirmed the Commonwealth principles declared 20 years previously at Singapore and pledged the association to concentrate particular effort on a number of key areas, including 1, promotion of its fundamental political values. 2, equality for women and men. The provision of universal access to education. The promotion of sustainable development. Protection of the environment. Action to combat drug trafficking and abuse and communicable diseases. Help for small states in taking their particular economic and security problems. Support for the United Nations and other international institutions in search of peace and the promotion of international consensus on global issues. The Trinidad and Tobago Declaration 2009. At the 2009 CHOGM held in Trinidad, Port of Spain, during the 60th anniversary year of the modern Commonwealth, the heads of government took pride in what they saw as their collective achievements over the next 6 decades. As they looked to the future, they reaffirmed a strong and abiding common commitment to the Commonwealth's fundamental values and principles. They noted that the special strength of the Commonwealth lay in the diversity of its membership, bound together not only by shared history and tradition, but also by an ethos of respect for all states and peoples, of shared values and principles, and of concern for the vulnerable. The heads of government solemnly reiterated their commitment to the Commonwealth core values, including notably, among others, international peace and security, economic growth and development, and the rule of law as essential to the progress and prosperity of all. Democracy, Universal Declaration of Human Rights and human rights covenants and instruments, tolerance, respect and understanding, separation of powers, rule of law, freedom of expression, economic and social development, gender equality, access to health and education, good governance, importance of civil society as partners in promoting and supporting Commonwealth values and interests of the people. The heads also reiterated their commitment to the core principles of consensus and common action, mutual respect, inclusiveness, transparency, accountability, legitimacy, and responsiveness. Again, as I have previously indicated, it should be noted that the voluntary nature of the Commonwealth and its adherence to common values and equality for all, which has been consistently reaffirmed, is at the heart of the Commonwealth's member states' practice of cultural diplomacy within the Commonwealth. Again and again, over the past 60 years, that is the lifespan of the modern Commonwealth. The Commonwealth has emphasized the following characteristics. A, membership consisting of peoples of different races, languages, and religions at every stage of economic development, from poor developing nations to wealthy industrialized nations, and encompassing a rich variety of cultures, traditions, and institutions. Within said diversity, all members hold certain principles in common. By pursuing these principles, the Commonwealth can continue to influence international society for the benefit of mankind. The Commonwealth believes also that it can provide a constructive example of the multinational approach, which is vital to peace and progress in the modern world. The association is based on consultation, discussion, and cooperation. Thus, we have a Commonwealth of values committed to democracy, human rights, and rule of law, and the rights of its citizens to social and economic development. As I've said, since their establishment in 1971, these core values have been progressively strengthened and expanded with new declarations and new commitments. Human and cultural rights are at the core of the Commonwealth values and have particular salience in the Commonwealth. In the preamble of the recently adopted Commonwealth Charter, member states recognize that the strength of the Commonwealth lies in the combination of our diversity and our shared inheritance in language, culture, and rule of law. And we are bound together by shared history and tradition, by respect for all states and peoples, by shared values and principles, and by concern for the vulnerable. Member states therefore affirmed their commitment to the promotion of international understanding and world peace, and influencing international society to the benefit of all through the pursuit of common principles and values in the 1912 Commonwealth Charter. Member states also committed to seek consensus through consultation and the sharing of experience, especially through practical cooperation, so as to serve as a model and as a catalyst for new forms of friendship and cooperation in the spirit of the Charter of the United Nations. Article 2 of the Commonwealth states that we are committed to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other relevant human rights conferences and international instruments. We are also committed to equality and respect for the protection and promotion of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right to development for all without discrimination on any grounds as the foundation of peaceful, just, and stable societies. We are implacably opposed to all forms of discrimination, whether rooted in gender, race, color, creed, political belief, or other grounds. Article 4 further states that we emphasize the need to promote tolerance, respect, understanding, moderation, and religious freedom, which are essential to the development of free and democratic societies, and recall that respect for the dignity of all human beings is critical to promoting peace and prosperity. We accept that diversity and understanding the richness of our multiple identities are fundamental to the Commonwealth's principles and approach. Thus, soft power, at its best approach of the Commonwealth, has brought an imperative track record. Over the past 2 decades, the Commonwealth has partly or fully suspended Maldives, Nigeria, Pakistan, Fiji, Sierra Leone, my country, and Zimbabwe. For a while, it watched the Gambia closely of those suspected. Fiji remains so on account of the military overthrow of a democratically elected government in 2006. Zimbabwe chose to walk away from the Commonwealth after strong public criticisms of the conduct of its 2002 presidential elections. The Commonwealth has consistently been of its times moving with the challenges before it. In the 50s and 60s, it led the move towards decolonization and supporting newly independent states, and then the fight against racist rule, particularly in Southern Africa. In the 1970s, it launched a major program of technical assistance to support our member states. In the 80s and 90s, it pioneered the notion of forgiving developing countries, and was a thought leader on climate change ahead of the Rio Summit. The Commonwealth has squarely focused special problems and vulnerabilities faced by small states. It has assiduously worked to promote the interest of women and youth. Within the past few weeks, Marlborough House hosted high-level roundtable meetings separately on early forced marriage, and that is what I call association of its time. It has responded to calls for reform. In the affirmation of Commonwealth principles agreed at CHOCOM 209, Heads call for the creation of an eminent persons group to undertake an examination of options for reform in order to bring the Commonwealth's many institutions into a stronger and more effective framework of cooperation and partnership. The group's goals were essentially to sharpen the impact, strengthen the networks, and raise the profile of the Commonwealth. The EPG reported to heads of government at the CHOCOM 211 report, wherein it said, the heads notably welcomed the report entitled A Commonwealth of the People, Time for Urgent Reform, agreeing that it provided a strong basis to revitalize the Commonwealth and its institutions and to ensure its continued relevance to member states and their people today and in the future. Most notably, the heads of government agreed to the following: reform of the Commonwealth to ensure that it is a more effective institution responsive to members' needs and capable of tackling the significant global challenges of the 21st century. 2, to reform of the Commonwealth Ministerial Action, CMJ, agreeing to the recommendations to strengthen the role of the Commonwealth Ministerial Group in order to enable the group to deal with the full range of serious or persistent violations of Commonwealth values. Recommendations of CMAG to strengthen the role of CMAG in order to enable the group to deal with the full range of serious or persistent violations of Commonwealth values. Creation of a charter for the Commonwealth as proposed by the Eminent Persons Group, embodying the principles contained in previous declarations, drawn together in a single consolidated document that is not legally binding. Like all other international organizations, the Commonwealth has been forced to tighten its purse strings. Many of my colleagues will tell you that after a challenging and lengthy budget deliberations, we now can truly say we are a Commonwealth that will now do more with less. As the Secretary General himself puts it, the Secretariat will now have a focus that will be narrower but deeper, focusing on comparative advantage. I would be remiss if in closing I do not identify some of the challenges that the Commonwealth faces. Many would argue, partly due to its characteristics I have referred to. Three significant short challenges are as follows. The contentious issue of EPG's proposal for a commissioner for democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. Two, the tightening of the purse strings as member states renew contributions and or for delinquent. Is the Commonwealth to be driven by membership aspirations and values or a dwindling budget? What is often seen by some as the dichotomy of the ABC, Australia, like 3 countries, Britain, Canada countries versus the others. So gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, that's my view about diplomacy connection to the Commonwealth. Thank you very much indeed.